here it is, YouTube. I'm Roadhawk Wilson, welcoming you into my home, and welcome to 10-Minute Stories with Roadhawk Wilson. Right now we're breaking down Byron the Silverblade, and in a bit we'll break down another story. In fact, if you guys want to hear more than one story a week, let me know in the comment section down below. But before you get too far, know that these stories are 100% improvised and told in one take, so everything you see is completely unfiltered and done. Now let's get started. In the last bit of story, which if you want to see that video, subscribe and follow the channel for that, Byron had recently found out that his mother was dead. He was feeling a sense of pride, though, that he could overcome the darkness that is with him. And for those of you who don't know, this is my shadow, who we're naming Shadow King. He's in all my videos and he is my storytelling partner. But anyways, Byron felt brave, he felt bold, he felt strong, he felt like he could do anything, even defy the very shadow that promised him so much more than he could ever admire. Women, lust, lore, legacies, everything that he wanted since he was a child. But he also felt the call of his grandfather, who was somehow going beyond the grave to contact his grandson. His grandfather was a noble man, he knew that. His mother had always spoken on how he was a man destined for greatness, but the world had cast aside, cast asunder, and ripped apart from his own legacy. Now Byron was faced with a promise that he could either kill the king, who he did not know to be his father, or he could continue forward and forge his own path. Byron felt himself being literally torn in both directions, his grandfather and his shadow fighting for his very soul. Byron looked at the remnants of his house and he saw a photo. The man that he saw with his mother looked brave and sturdy. He was a big man, about 7 feet tall, and built like a horse. Don't make the obvious joke there. He was a man who seemed like a mountain, something beyond legacy, something beyond what he had ever seen before. This photo, however, was hidden in the ashes, as if it couldn't be burned, as if something didn't want it to be burned, and Byron felt it calling. He heard the shadow in the back of his head saying, "Boy, come, kill the king, assert yourself as the ruler of this country." And within that, Byron felt himself being pulled in a darker direction. He wondered why this man who was with his mother left her to die. He wondered why he could trust someone who would do such a thing. And he wondered what happened to his grandfather. How this man, if he was such a bold legacy, if he could transcend death, could honestly betray his mother and let her die. And Byron in that moment felt a deep, dark sadness. Something vile within him rose, and the shadow encroached its hands around him as if they were demonic wings enrapturing him. Those around him could not see him, and there was a shade just cast over Byron. The sword that his grandfather was speaking to him silenced, and within that moment Byron saw something that he didn't know what it was, but it could have been his future and it could have been his past. He saw the story of his mother and this man. He saw that they were in love, that they came from two different worlds but were of commonality and personality. And then he saw this man throw his mother aside for other women. He saw her being beat by him and the darkness grew. He saw her being captured by his men. And suddenly he realized his father was the king. His father was a man who had the power to rule a nation and yet left him to rot in this village as a outcast, as a fool, as a martyr. And Byron's anger grew, and the shadow's wings encroached upon him even further, wrapping its tendril-like wings around him, making him even darker. And as Byron became angrier and angrier, he saw what could be his future. He saw the promise of Byron slaying the king. But suddenly a light shined through, something bold, something greater than death, shine through, and Byron saw and felt the action that he had envisioned. He felt the weight of killing his own father. He felt the very blood of his father on his face, on his arms and legs, as it had splattered all over him. Byron was cast in this light, and at the same time he noticed that he was in that moment. He had killed the king somehow, and he had achieved what he had been promised, but the shadow was nowhere to be seen. It was gone. It had gone somewhere that he didn't know, somewhere he didn't even recognize, but it was beyond the ocean. And Byron saw his blade. It was shining brighter than he could have ever hoped, but it was cast in a red liquid. The blood of his father, the blood of his ancestors. Byron was not a king. He was not a hero. He was a murderer. And the very presence of soldiers, of thousands of them, came upon him, and he had one choice: to kill thousands, which he knew he was capable of, or to run. Byron ran, jumping from the castle wall, somehow surviving, but ultimately breaking his right knee. He crawled into the distance. The soldiers called out to him, "Murder this man! Murder the king's murderer!" He thought to himself for a moment that that was a bit of irony, but at the same time he knew that he was an outcast. He knew he was more of a martyr than ever before. And yet the light he felt within him shone even greater. The light of the blade shone even greater. And Byron saw in that moment that his grandfather was showing him something. That his grandfather was not just transcending death, but was promising him the future that would happen if Byron killed the king. But still, he knew that somehow where he was not reality. Where he was a magical place, filled with great darkness, great possibility, and great future. But Byron was no longer in the village. He was somewhere between worlds. And all he had was the shadow's absence and the blade's light. Byron called out, hoping for others, but all he saw were monsters. And in a fit of fury, he slit the throats of each of them, cutting them in twain, and he made them into nothing more than flesh bags. Byron knew that his rage must subside, but he could hear the soldiers calling out to him, "Kill him! Kill him! Kill him!" He tried to run, but his leg was limp. He crawled through the shadows, through the darkness of the trees and the very evil that he felt this forest being. And then he realized the shadow wasn't gone. It wasn't just beyond the seas, it was everywhere. The shadow had covered the very sky, and it was trying to capture Byron and his blade. Within that moment, Byron saw the very evil within himself, and he knew that he must defy it. But he had no idea how to escape this ethereal realm that he was in. Byron tried to run, but his leg felt ever so broken, and it was beyond a prayer. Bones were sticking through it, and yet at the same time a shadow of it healing kept appearing. Byron knew this was the promise of the shadow, the promise that something more was to come if he had just given in to even more darkness. He wondered how there could be more darkness, but before him was a dark sky with an evil face sneering down at him. The only light in the world was the blade. Byron knew that he must vow to not achieve this future, to not give in to this darkness, but as he ran, all he saw was trees and darkness. There were rocks, but he seemed to run through them, and he seemed to approach the very world itself as if he was between what was and what wasn't. Byron knew that he was nothing more than a shadow in this world, but it was both his future and his destiny. He tried to figure out how to defy it. He tried to figure out how to overpower it, but he could not. Byron was stuck in a world of his own making, but at the same time of his own hate. But then his light blade shined brighter than the sun and pierced through the darkness. He heard a great cry, and that is where we will leave the next bit of the story. If you guys are enjoying these, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Obviously my voice kind of crowded out through that bit of this, but I really do enjoy these stories. They are a great release, and I love having Shadow King here as my storytelling partner. I love the people who have come through and supported the channel. Right now we're sitting at 6 subscribers with 1 video and over 13 views, which I take as a huge win for this kind of thing on YouTube. I cannot thank you enough, and I cannot appreciate you guys enough who have come through and just been amazing. I will see you in another video.